Well, welcome to the video tuition lesson number 3 for the higher people. I think I've called this video tuition lesson number 2 for the intermediate people. They are basically the same lesson because they cover basic percentages. Okay, let's start by looking at what we mean by percent. You probably know by now that percent means out of 100, and this is used as a way of comparing scores in tests, for example, between different subjects or between different topics in a subject. But let's see how we calculate this. Let's do a concrete example. Okay, example 1 here. I've said, supposing you had a spelling test of 25 questions and you scored 19 out of 25. Well, 19 out of 25, it means you've got 19 questions right out of a total of 25 questions. And you've probably seen that this is written down in that way. 19 out of 25 or 19 over 25. These are all the same things. Now, what percentage is really doing? It's really doing this. It's saying if there had not been 25 questions, but instead there had been 100 questions, a bit like that, instead of 25 questions there had been 100 questions, what would your score have been? That is basically what percentage is doing. It's transforming this thing, changing this 19 out of 25 questions into some number out of 100 questions. And so we need to know how many times we would increase 25 by to get 100, and we would do the same thing with the 19. We'd increase that by the same amount. And as you probably know by now, 25 will divide 4 times into 100. So if we multiply 25 by 4, we will get to 100. So we will have to do exactly the same thing with the 19. Multiply it by 4. Here I've got it written down here. This little red thing there is multiplied by 4, multiplied by 4. So we're going to multiply the 19 by 4 to give how many questions we would have got right had the test been out of 100 questions, and we're going to multiply the 25 by 4. Well, 4 19s come to 76, so 76 out of 100, which is 76%. This means that had there been 100 questions, you would probably have got about 76 right, going upon the score that you got of 19 out of 25. And so you can say that a score of 19 out of 25 has a percentage value of 76%. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Now let's look at another example. Okay, let's just straighten that up. And this time it's not so straightforward. Example 2 says, but supposing you had a different test, and this time your score was 21 out of 37. How would you find this as a percentage? Now this is harder because here there are 37 questions, and it's not clear how many times 37 divides into 100, so you do not know how many times to increase 21 by. So what you have to do is you have to divide 37 into 100, which is that, using a calculator, and the answer you'll get is this: 2.702702.7, and it repeats. In other words, if you multiply that number by 37, you will get 100. So we would have to increase the 21 by this number of times to see what your score would have been out of 100. Alright, so what we do now is we multiply our 21 by this number here, 21 times that, and we get this decimal here, which we can round to the nearest decimal is 58%. Okay, in this case we've had to use a calculator. In the example 1 we didn't, because we knew that 25 fitted exactly into 100. Here we couldn't see how many times 37 fitted into 100 exactly, so we had to use a calculator which generated this long decimal. Doesn't matter, multiply that by the 21, and this tells you that if we increase 21 by this amount of times, you would have achieved about 57.7 questions correct out of 100, or in other words 58% would have been right. Okay, let's look at example 3. It says here, supposing you win £4,398 in the lottery and you spend £510 of this on new clothes. What percentage of your winnings have you spent on new clothes? Well, this is much different from the last one because the numbers are now no longer very convenient, and so we will have to use the calculator. Well, the first thing we do is we look at these numbers here and we make the fraction. So in other words, £510 out of £4,398 was spent on clothes. We've made a fraction, well, a cumbersome looking fraction, but nonetheless it's a fraction. And what you do next after you've made this fraction is you find the decimal for that fraction, which is, there it is, 0.1159681, and it goes on. To change this decimal into a percentage, all we need now do is multiply it by 100. Multiplying it by 100 has the effect of moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. Remember, there are 2 zeros and 100, so when we multiply this by 100, this is going to move 2 places to the right. It moves 2 places to the right because if we're multiplying by 100, the thing must get bigger. Okay, the number must get bigger. So we end up with 11.59618%, which rounded to the nearest percentage point is 12%. Okay, so you have spent 12% of your winnings on clothes. So £510 is 12% of 4,398. Okay, now let's move on to example 4 and just straighten that out, get it in the right place. Example 4 says, in a bag of 113 sweets, 69 are soft centers and the rest are hard. What percentage are hard centers? Well, if 69 of them are soft, then what's left in the 113 must be the hard centers. So we have to do this subtraction. 113 take away 69 is 44. So 44 out of 113 are hard centers. So we make the fraction. There it is. 44 out of 113. Find the decimal to that fraction. There it is. Long decimal. Multiply the decimal by 100. This decimal point is going to move 2 places there, and there is our answer. 38.9380531%, which rounds to the nearest percent as 39%. So 39% were hard centers. Okay, now we're going to move on now to see how we use percentages to actually find amounts of things. Okay, very, very common usage of percentage. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to give an example which does not involve using calculators. This is very important because the paper 5 in the GCSE papers are now devoted to non-calculator methods, and they are beginning to use percentage questions that do not require calculators. They do require you to have a good understanding of percentages. Here's an example of how it works. Here in this example, I've got here a television costs £270. What is the final cost when VAT at 17.5% is included? Now this 17.5% looks a very, very difficult percentage to play around with. In fact, if we break this up, we will be able to find 17.5% of this without any calculator. Okay, so let's see how you do that. No calculator allowed, so put it away. Okay, here we go. Here we must find 17.5% of that, and then add the answer on to £270 to get the final price. Okay, I think that's pretty clear, because once you've found the VAT on this, you've got to add it onto that. Okay, that's all I'm saying there. But then how do we find this 17.5% of £270? Well, as I said to you, we have to break this 17.5 up, and this is how you do it. The first thing you must do is find 10%. Okay, here I have it down the bottom here. Find 10% of £270. Well, it is £27. If you don't understand where that comes from, I'll show you here. 10% is the same thing as 10 over 100, 10 out of 100. 10 out of 100 is really 1/10. That 0 can cross off with that 0, leaving us with the fraction 1/10. So 10% of anything is really 1/10 of it. Okay, so in this question here, we're looking for 1/10 of 270. Okay, well, 1/10 of 270, we just have to cross that 0 off and we'll get 27. Okay, so we now know that 10% of this is £27. Now then, look what happens if we take a half of 10%. We will get 5%. Okay, so we can say find 5% of £270. Well, if 5% is a half of 10%, then all we need to do to find 5% of 270 is to take a half of this 27. Half that, we'll get £13.50. So 5% of £270 is £13.50. Now, look what happens if we take a half of 5. What do we get? What's a half of 5? Can anyone tell me out there? You're quite right, it's 2.5. So if we take 2.5%, we find 2.5% of £270, we must have to take a half of this £13.50. Take a half of it, we get £6.75. Now let's just recap on what we found. We found 10% of 270 is 27. We halved that to find 5% of that £13.50. We halved the 5% to get 2.5%, and that came out as £6.75, taking the half of £13.50. If we add together these percentages, 10%, 5%, 2.5%, we get 17.5. Okay, if we add them three together, we get 17.5%. So all we need to do then is add 27, £13.50, £6.75, and there it is, £47.25. We've done that without any use of a calculator, and it's not been really that difficult. All we've done is start off with 10%, take a half, and we've then added up all the answers we've got to get £47.25. Of course, that means that the final cost of the TV will be the original price, £270, adding on the VAT, £47.25, comes to £317.25. Okay, of course this begs the question, how would you do this question if you did have a calculator? First thing you'd have to realize is that 17.5% is really the same thing as 17.5%. Write this whole number and a fraction as a decimal percentage. Okay, so what you would do then is you would make the, if I just get that in the right position, there we are, 17.5% means 17.5 out of 100. Okay, we're slowly getting towards the percentage expression. When you've done that, you then find the decimal for this fraction. Well, the decimal for the fraction is this 17.5 divided by 100. Well, if 17.5 is being divided by 100, all right, then this number is going to get smaller, and it's going to get smaller by moving the decimal point 2 places in that direction. So to give you 0.175. So 17.5% as a decimal is really this thing here, 0.175. Now you need to find this thing. You need to find 17.5% of £270. Well, when you see the word of in mathematics, you should always think of multiply. So this changes to this decimal, the decimal for 17.5%, this decimal down here, multiplied by £270. So we're finding 0.175 of £270 comes to £47.25. Final cost of the TV, as before, you add it on, £317.25. Here's another example. Okay, a new car costing £9,678 loses 6% of its value at the end of each year. How much is it worth at the end of 2 years? Well, first thing we need to do is make the fraction. Make the fraction, there it is. What does 6% mean? It means 6 divided by 100, or 6/100ths. Now you've got to be very careful here, because you're not dealing in double figures on the top here. You're dealing with a single digit. So there's going to be an extra 0 which creeps into the decimal. And here it is. Okay, there. 6/100ths means 6 divided by 100. So the decimal point, which is in front, just behind the 6 there, it's going to move 2 places that way. If it moves 2 places that way, there must be a 0 in front of the 6 and before the decimal point. So 6% is 0.06 as a decimal. Very important. Then we multiply. 6% of the 9,678 means 0.6 times that, and if you do that on a calculator, out pops the answer, £580.68. Now this is the value, or this is the amount, sorry, the amount that's lost at the end of the first year. So the value of the car at the end of 1 year must be the original amount, take away this, and there it is here. So the value of the car after the first year is this £9,097.32. Now this, now in the second year, this this reduced price here, this again itself loses 6% of this value. So again, what we've got to do now is we've got to find 6% of this, and there it is there. It means 0.6 times 0.06, I should say, 0.06 times £9,097.32, and there comes the answer there. In other words, at the end of the second year, it's lost this amount. So to find the true value at the end of the second year, we've got to take this amount away from that, and there it is there. We've got that, which is down here, being taken away from the value at the end of the first year, and finally we get that answer, or to the nearest pence, £8,551.48. That's the value at the end. Sorry, you can't quite see that. That's the value at the end of the second year. Okay, let's do another example. This is example 3. It reads, 79% of students at a sixth form college are girls. If the college has 3,561 students, how many are boys? Well, again, we must make the fraction. Okay, 79% means 79 out of 100. That as a decimal, make the decimal. Can anyone tell me what the decimal is going to be for this? Yes, you're right, 0.79. And then we need to do the multiplying. 79% of the 3,561 means that decimal, the decimal form for that percentage, of multiply 3,561. It comes to this figure here. Now this is a decimal. You can't have 0.19 of a girl. Well, not that I know of. But so you round that to the nearest whole number and you'll get 2,813 girls. Okay? Well, if that's how many girls there are, to find how many boys, you must have to take that away. I've used the decimal form to get a decimal form for the boys, and then once I've done that, I've rounded it up to the nearest whole boy. So we've got that many whole girls and that many whole boys. Okay, there we are. Alright, now we're going to move on to another part of percentages, which is called percentage increase. Okay, let's go straight into this and see what we mean by this. A gold ring originally cost £200 some years ago. Now the same ring is worth £365. What has been the percentage increase in its value? Okay, now this is often a problem with prices that move up and down. Prices of houses move up, prices of cars move down, and it's quite a good question to ask, well, what is the percentage increase, or what is the percentage decrease if there's been a loss in value? Okay, here we're dealing with percentage increase, and let's see how it's done. This is a ring, alright? It was worth that, it's now worth this. What's the percentage increase in its value? Well, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to find the actual increase. Now the actual increase is the difference between the two values. Okay, so I've taken the £200 away from the higher price, the higher value, and I've got £165. In other words, it's gone up by this amount. Well, to find the percentage increase, you have to use this rather strange looking formula. There's a percentage increase. You have to take the actual increase, which we've just found out to be £165, divided by the original value, which, as you probably can see, is going to be 200. Get the decimal for that and multiply your answer by 100. So here we have it. 165 is the actual increase in the ring's value, divided by its original value, which was £200. We make that fraction 0.825, multiply it by 100, and we get 82.5%. Oh, you can't see that, sorry. There it is. This fraction, which you'd work out on a calculator, is 0.825. Multiply that by 100, becomes 82.5 or 82.5%. So it's increased its value by 82.5%. It's not bad for a gold ring. Okay, here's example 2 to show you that not everything to do with percentage increase is concerned with money. Here's an example of a sunflower sapling. Okay, example 2. When a sunflower sapling is measured, its height is 46 centimeters. After some months, the plant's height is measured again and found to be 1 meter 1.53 meters. What has been the percentage increase in the plant's height? Well, hidden in this question is a little bit of a trick, not a trick, something you've got to watch out for. Here you're in centimeters, here you're in meters. Make sure you get either that all in meters, and that's in meters, or put that into centimeters so it's the same as this one here. I've decided to do the latter, to make everything into centimeters. So the first step is to make the units, the same. 1.53 meters is 153 centimeters. Okay, now we find the actual increase. It's gone from 46 to 153 centimeters. So we take them away. It's grown by 107 centimeters. So the percentage increase is the actual increase divided by the original value, 46 centimeters, times 100. Well, this here comes to the decimal 2.326087 times by 100, and you get 232.6%. I've given this example to show you that percentages are not always things below 100, that you can have percentages which have gone above 100. In other words, this plant has increased its height by 232%. That's its percentage increase. Okay, let's look now at percentage decrease, give you some examples of this. Here's an example. Rachel bought some shares for £4,590. A year later, the same shares were worth £2,861. What has been the percentage loss in the value of the shares? Okay, well, there is the same formula, slightly worded differently, but nonetheless more or less the same idea. Percentage loss is the actual loss divided by the original price times 100. In this case, the actual loss is going to be this figure taken away from that figure, and so there we have it in the numerator, divided by the original value, there it is, times 100. So doing this, taking this from this, we get 1,729. All that divided by that produces on a calculator this decimal, times that by 100. It's going to move the decimal point 2 places that way, and to the nearest percentage it's 38%. So the value of the shares fell by 38%. Okay, let's again have one example that is not about money, and it's about temperature fall this time. It's example 2. One summer, over a 24-hour period, the highest daytime temperature was measured to be 26 degrees centigrade, and the lowest nighttime temperature was 9 degrees centigrade. What was the percentage fall in the temperature? Well, we need to do this time. Percentage fall. Okay, remember last time with money it said loss, doesn't matter, but this time it's percentage fall. is the actual fall divided by the original value times 100. So what was the actual fall? Well, it fell from 26 to 9. So we've got to take that away. Over the original value, well, the original value was 26. Okay, that becomes 17 over 26. Find the decimal for that on the calculator. There it is. All of it's times 100. Move the decimal point 2 places that way. Answer 65.4%. So the temperature fell by 65.4%. Okay, now when you come to do non-calculator papers, there are some very useful percentages written as fractions, and you really must get to know these because they will help you an awful lot. Firstly, you must realize that 1% means 1/100th of anything. Okay, just 1/100th is 1%. So if you can figure out what 1% of something is by taking 100th of it, you could find 2%. You just double it. Another very important fraction is to realize that 5% means 5/100ths, but 5 goes into itself once and into 100 20 times, so 5/100ths is the same fraction as 1/20th. In other words, 5% of anything is really 1/20th of it. Okay, here's another one, and we've already used this one. 10% means 10/100ths, which is the same as a tenth. So this is a really super important relationship to keep in mind. Yeah, you can always find 10% of something by finding a tenth of it. And dividing the quantity by 10, you'll find a tenth. Another important one, doesn't crop up so often, is this one here, 12.5. 12.5% means 12.5 over 100. 12.5 actually divides into 100 exactly 8 times. So 12.5% is really finding an eighth of anything. Okay, another one very important is 20%. 20 over 100, 20 goes into itself once, into 105 times. 20% is really 1/5 of anything. Here's one you all know, I'm sure. 25% is really 1/4 of anything. Okay, here's some more that you may not know. 33 and 1/3 is really 33.333 recurring divided by that divided into itself goes once. Divide that into 100 goes exactly 3 times. So 33 1/3% of anything is the same as finding 1/3 of it. Here's a really hard one. 50% is 1/2 of anything. Hope everyone knows that. And 75% is 3/4 of anything. Now I've missed one out here. I was going to put down one in between here, and I've left this for you to think about. 33 1/2, if I double that, I will get 66 2/3%. Well, if 33 1/3 is the same as 1/3 of anything, what fraction of anything do you think that 66 2/3% would be? Okay, I'll let you answer that one. Anyway, here's some final examples of how we use these fractions. If you know how to use these fractions, then it would make doing a non-calculator percentage question that much easier. Here's an example. A similar complex has a seating capacity of 1,670 seats. 40% of these are luxury seats. How many is this? Well, 40%. Well, I know that 20% means 1/5. Okay, and 1/5 of 1,670 is this 1,670 divided by 5. Okay, so if I do that division, I do 5 into 1 go, 5 into 16 goes 3 and 1 over, 5 into 17 goes 3 and 2 over, 5 into 20 goes 4 times 334. So 334 seats is 1/5 or 20%. Okay, so 40% must be twice that number, because 40% is twice 20%. So all I need to do is to double this 334 here, multiply it by 2. There's the answer, 668 seats. That's 40% of 1,670. One last example. Here it is, if I get it on the screen. What is 35% of $450? Alright, well, start off 10%. 10% of 450 is 45. I just knock off a 0. That means gives me a tenth, $45. If I know that 10% is 45, then 30%, which is 3 times bigger than 10%, must be 3 times 45. So 30% of $450 is $135. And if I take a half of 10% to get 5%, then I have to take a half of 45. There it is. 1/2 of 45 is $22.5, $22.50. So in other words, 35%, there's 30, there's 5, that's how much 30% is, this is how much 5% is. You just add those two together. No calculator necessary. And there we are. Okay, hence 35% is this, add that, $157.50. Okay, that's the end of this first unit on basic percentages. For the higher people, there is another percentage tuition lesson which goes on to more to harder percentages. Alright, many thanks for your time.